to join us. Without the fleece vest, the government is clearly closed, and he's with us right now. Bloomberg intelligence senior U.S. policy analyst. It's great to see you. First of all, congrats on the big win this weekend. Secondly, nothing has changed since we last spoke, has it?
No. In fact, we got a client who called in this morning and said, when is the government shutdown going to end? And my answer to him was, I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I see no reason why both sides will come into Congress, come into Washington this week and say, I feel like I need to negotiate. President Trump just had a really big win. He's going to fly back to Washington. He's going to feel really good about his position. The Democrats, they're going to look at the polling that came out over the weekend that also says that independents slightly blaming Republicans for this.
Yep.
So they're going to feel good. So when we talk about when is the government going to shut down or end, we should also talk about pressure points. President Trump just took away the biggest pressure point by saying he's going to pay these military members. The next biggest pressure point in our view is this idea of SNAP benefits running out in November, at the beginning of November, because the White House has said that they have enough money for October. October's been allocated, but there's questions of whether or not they will be able to have sufficient funds for the 24 million Americans that get SNAP benefits. That could be something that really pushes Congress to come back and say, we need to make a deal.
And Nathan, speaking of some of those inflection points, besides the SNAP benefits, the Democrats have also made this an argument about health care, ACA notices, et cetera. That should be on the horizon, too, within the next few days, couple of weeks max as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when these letters go out and they say your premium is going from X dollars to 3 times what you're paying right now, we've seen it. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has already said that her family members are impacted. And so there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to go into these holiday seasons going, okay, how am I going to pay for healthcare next year? And when these premiums are going up such an amount, that's going to put a lot of pressure on both moderates and think of these purple districts. But also, I think you're going to see a lot of pressure in places that you don't anticipate. There's going to be a lot of Trump supporters that are ultimately going to be impacted by this. And we're just going to have to see. In fact, when Speaker Johnson gave his press conference this morning, it was the first time that he sort of insinuated, to my recollection, that Obamacare may actually stick around for a little bit. Normally they say we're going to get rid of Obamacare, but it was this idea that maybe Obamacare is just here to stay, because he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the way it was designed is extremely difficult because as you give these subsidies out and people get used to them, it's really difficult to claw subsidies back.
Smithsonian closed. I know you were telling people to get to the museums before they shut down. This is like sort of the gas prices of a shutdown, at least in the early phases, right? It's something that's right in front of people, makes a good picture on the front of the paper, makes a good lead in the newscast, see the chains across the monuments, or the Smiths. They go to the zoo and they cry. The kids cry when they can't get in. You can't log on to the Panda Cam. I'll confirm that in a minute. Does that move constituents?
Well, the Panda Cam is off.
Did you confirm that? Thank you. All right.
But, you know, I think
this is news.
We're starting to enter the unintended consequences portion of the shutdown. First week of shutdown is fine. I mean, obviously, we don't want to go to the zoo and all that other stuff. But, like, for example, Bailey Lipschultz had a great piece this morning about how there are a lot of IPOs ready to get SEC blessing, and the SEC can't bless it. And so there are unintended consequences that are coming from a government shutdown. Data, we haven't even talked about like what the Federal Reserve is going to be looking at or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because everybody's used to, okay, what's happening? We're going to miss one report. We probably have a good estimations of what that's going to look like. You're going to miss 2 reports. You're going to miss 3 reports. Then things start to get a little bit. So we're entering now the unintended consequences, and we haven't even talked about air traffic controllers, because anecdotally there's been reporting that Chicago, Nashville, Washington, D.C., slight delays. But if we get into a situation where we're getting closer into the holiday season and you start to see air traffic controllers start calling in sick en masse, then things are going to change.
Forget it.
So pressure points are coming. And believe me, I do think this shutdown's, I don't think it's going to last till Thanksgiving or, you know, I don't. I mean, I think it could, I mean, look, Thanksgiving is a long time away and there's lots of time between now and then because these unintended consequences and these pressure points are just going to continue to multiply over and over and over. But again, I don't see any reason why both sides should be negotiating right now.
Wow.
And both sides feel like they have good field position, right? We had Johnson earlier today. Hakeem Jeffries also saying that he had some signs of optimism also.
Yeah, I mean, when both sides go home, and look, the House Republicans are still home. When both sides go home, they're looking at the same data, they're looking at the same talking points, and they're coming out with the same position that we're good. When the Democrats go home, they look at what I referred to earlier, where the independents slightly favor the Republicans more in terms of blaming Republicans for this. Republicans go home, they see data in polling that suggests that 85 or 9% of their caucus is really happy with their strategy. And so there's really no reason for either side to come back. The Republicans continue to say they should come back to Washington, but I'm saying there's no reason why they shouldn't negotiate, because the Republicans are looking at this idea that we've already passed the clean CR. We've done what we need to do to have the government open. Senator Lindsey Graham even said that yesterday, that he just said, I don't see any reason why I should talk to Democrats at this point, because I've done what I need to do to keep the government open. Democrats are coming back and they're saying Obamacare subsidies. And both sides go home, they talk to their constituents, and this polarization of Congress is ultimately what I think is extending the shutdown right now, because neither side sees a reason to negotiate.
Called up Panda Cam, says offline, red circle with a line through it. Kids are crying everywhere. Hakeem Jeffries calling the members back this week just to show up and be seen, right? To be caught in the act and do interviews, by the way. You'll probably see a lot of them on Bloomberg later in the week. And the two leaders were out over the weekend doing Sunday morning television to illustrate what these two gentlemen are talking about. Listen to Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Johnson from Sunday morning.
The Republicans have already said we were going to have thoughtful conversations, deliberation, and debate about continuing the COVID-era Obamacare subsidies because they don't expire until December 31st. They're trying to pretend like that's a September issue. It never was.
My friends on the other side of the aisle, they seem to believe that health care is an extraneous issue. We don't believe it's an extraneous issue. It's a central issue.
From Fox News Sunday. You weren't on the power panel this weekend, were you?
I was not.
I always look to see if you were. So what amazes me is that the talking points haven't really evolved at all. We're having the same conversation we were having before the shutdown started.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about this in terms of its relation with other shutdowns? Usually we're finding new levers to pull and different arguments as we get our way through it. President's going up to the Hill to convince people. We're just all sitting here having the same conversation 3 weeks later.
Well, if you think about how shutdowns end in the stages of a shutdown, the shutdown immediately happens, and then both sides go to their talking points. And their talking points is the same talking point. That person over there needs to come over and negotiate with me. In fact, I think anecdotally, there was a scene where Senator Thune and Senator Schumer were in the same hallway saying the same point. And one of the reporters said, well, he's just right there. We want to go talk to him. And they didn't. So they have to get it out of their system. And as they're going through these talking points, that's when the pressure points come in. Yep. But as we've seen with this shutdown, pressure points really aren't there. The markets don't care. I mean, I had a client just last week said, look, I appreciate you telling me about the shutdown, but I just don't care. In fact, Abby McCloskey put out a piece just this morning on Bloomberg Opinion saying that Americans are getting used to shutdowns. And I would argue that's probably what's happening here. Because, if we go back to 2018, 2019, we had a 35-day shutdown. It was partial. It was also over the holiday season. So people had other things to focus on. But this shutdown comes in an era where partisanship is always expected. And so as we get into this shutdown, they're going through the talking points, and I think it just lengthens out the time which they can get from their talking points to the pressure points to ultimately having a solution. Mario mentioned Obamacare subsidies. That's going to be a pressure point, because when those letters come out, there are going to be members of both sides of the aisle who are going to get questions from their constituents saying, I want you to go fix this. When we get to the SNAP benefits, 42 million Americans are going to call up their congressperson and say, I want you to fix this. If there's air traffic controllers that are calling in sick, I want you to go fix this. But right now, nobody's saying, I want you to go fix this.
But Nathan, going back to the markets question, right? Why don't markets care? I mean, that's a lot of people who are probably holding on to their money, given that they won't be getting a paycheck anytime soon. Is it just a small sliver of the economy? That's the reason that markets aren't worried about these people kind of pulling back?
So we need to talk about the markets at a macro level, and we also need to talk about specific sectors. So like with the SNAP benefits I talked about, grocery stores exposed there. When you talk about large defense contractors, they're usually paid on a 2 to 3 year contracting scale. So right now, they're in a point where they can just live through the government shutdown. It really doesn't impact all that much. Small contractors, completely different story.
How about a vacuum of data, though?
Exactly. So the traders obviously don't like the fact that the data doesn't exist. But like we have alternative data at WSL, ALT, Go.
Wow.
We have alternative data we've put on the terminal. There are other options that at least get you through the mindset or through the couple of weeks. But when it comes to the macro level, back in 2018, back in 2019, there was always this discussion of what's the debt ceiling versus what's the government shutdown. Because the debt ceiling scares markets, scares the fixed income markets, scares the markets. The government shutdown, on the other hand, there's not a lot of mechanisms that go from government decisions that will flow into the economy that ultimately then says, this is going to impact this equity or this stock. Anna Wong over Bloomberg Economics has said that, for every week that there's a government shutdown, you're shaving off about 0.2% of GDP. And she said in one of the recent calls that we just had is that it wouldn't really come up in the unemployment data until you get to mid-November. And so even if you're talking about the lack of consumer spending, we probably still have another 2 to 3, 4 weeks until that flows into the economy. Because at the end of the day, if Congress can resolve this, it's fixed.
Wow. Put the fleece back on when we reopen?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's Nathan Dean for you. Told you he was coming. Bloomberg Intelligence, his Monday Briefing podcast just went on the RSS feed. That's what the wonks call the podcast here at Balance of Power. You subscribing to Nathan's podcast? There's a lot there.
Oh, absolutely.
It's good.
I'm a fellow Bears fan.
Exactly. Yeah. The clients are calling, and he's giving you the stories on the podcast. I will mention very quickly,